What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Powerstroke Tech Talk podcast. Minor adjustment. Um, Welcome. We are here with returning guest, Mr. Cody. We are a little light numbered today, but we have Mr. Thomas Brown back, our Amsoil rep, who is back today, back tonight, back today, maybe for you, because this is Sunday when you're listening to it in the morning. We're going to talk about coolant, and it is something that is kind of forgotten about in our vehicles. People, us, even us technicians, sometimes forget about coolants, just taken for granted at times. So I'll be the first to confess. I often forget about coolant. When thinking about how vehicles are running, not more so when we have, overheating problems and stuff, but just coolant. We always remember changing the oil, but like I said, coolant goes forgotten about. So we're just going to shed some light on that this episode. And for those of you that, again, who cannot check us out on YouTube and listen to us, not having the ability to shut us off in the background, check us out on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, all the mainstream podcast apps so that you can be affluent in our discussions. I have currently some things pulled up here on the old computer, um, talking about, or not talking about, some on the motorcraft side of the fluids. But when we had our diesels, 7.3s, Cody can rep for that. We have our 6.0s, then our 6.4s, our 6.7s, and the ones they trickled in between. The ones not a fan of. But all of these different models have different coolants, and can we mix them? Do you want to mix them? What are these new ones Ford has out right now? Everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but I have gotten a lot of feedback and comments about, hey, Ford's gotten rid of this orange. I can't use orange anymore. What is going on? What is this? And now it's true. We are now using yellow. Um, I guess what would you say, Tom, that orange was just kind of phased out, I guess, or I mean
Correct.
it's
It came into existence in the beginning of model year 11 with the introduction of the 6.7. Uh, so basically, every 6.7 that was produced starting in model year 2011, so probably what the summer fall of 2010,
mm-hmm.
when they would have hit the lot, those things came with orange coolant. And then, according to my handy dandy chart here, and this is what I'm referencing tonight, which is an actual Motorcraft quick reference chart for coolants. Um, Starting for F250 through 550s, starting on July 9th of 2018, uh, F250 through 550s switched over to the yellow coolant. And then uh, pretty quickly thereafter, that same family of vehicles, uh, started switching over more and more of them to the new yellow coolant. And so, you know, sometimes companies don't always tell you why they're making a change, but you have to understand that if they're making a change, there's usually a performance reason associated with it. They found out that something wasn't working right with it, or that they've got an option that's better, But the one thing that I learned a long time ago when I first started messing with coolants is that part of what drives these changes is the fact that Ford and all the rest of these companies, they're selling automobiles worldwide. And so while the the mechanical aspect of the vehicle might be identical or very similar where they sell it, what is not the same is water quality and water hardness all around the world. So even across the United States, we have vastly different water quality and water hardness levels depending upon where you are. And so that really drives performance and serviceability and life of these coolants dependent upon what water it's mixed with. And so, you know, I'm in my mid 50s, and I remember as a kid, you could not buy pre-diluted coolant. It just didn't
Really?
exist. Oh no, you bought concentrate every time you bought coolant, and you would mix it with water right out of your hose, you know, garden hose or tap water or whatever, and that's what you dealt with. But the service intervals on cooling systems back then was very short. But frankly, most people didn't do it until they had a breakdown. You know, a water pump went out, a radiator failed, or a heater core failed. And so you would change your coolant when you experienced one of those failures. So, you know, I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit. But, you know, so, and that held true all the way up through around, I'll go back and look at my chart here to make sure I got the date right. If you look at F250 through 550 that were built at the Kentucky plant, which is probably a vast majority of the trucks that get sold in the United States, they switched from green conventional coolant to gold in the model year 2002 timeframe. You know, so sometime probably 01, 02 timeframe, they switched from green to gold. So basically, every 6 liter that hit the dealer lot for model year 2002 was equipped with gold. And 7.3s had a mixture, depending upon if they were an early 7.3 or a late 7.3.
Mm-hmm.
They either had green conventional or gold.
Yep.
But every 6 liter and every 6.4 came from the factory with gold. And then every 6.7 starting in 11 had the orange, and then in the summer of 18 we start seeing that switch over to the new yellow. So that's kind of a quick history of that.
I think the orange, just in my in my in experience, and I don't know if other technicians out there or for other DIYers for that matter, I think the orange is probably the most easiest to diagnose because the snail trail of the dried crusty coolant that it leaves, it's, you know, almost, I don't want to say hot pink, but it's, I mean, it's almost like a powdery whitish pink. You're like, oh well shit, it's Lincoln right there, you know. It just looks like a stalactite sometime, or stalagmite, whatever, crustified, you know, on top of the line. So, you know, ding 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 ding. Where I can remember back in the 6 liter days, you know, when they were still under warranty doing coolant repairs, I can remember forgetting an O-ring, you know, and having to check where the coolant was leaking, and you know, it was so clear and gold. It was just, it was sometimes really hard to identify, especially if it was on an engine that, you know, maybe wasn't clean and dry. You know, the engine had oil residue over it, and you're looking for this clear fluid, like a trickle. Like, where is this? You know, just when I think back over my years, just, you know, you recapped, you know, the coolants over the time frames. It's like, oh yeah, I remember them 6.0s, and now, you know, growing up with the 6.7s with the orange to pretty much early 2017. You know, shoot, all the coolant leaks we've seen with radiators and water pumps at TSB that they had out, and you know, I had one customer, speaking about water pumps, he had one particular truck. It was just water pump after water pump after water pump, and he was putting the water pumps on himself. And the last couple of them he had me do, he was always bringing the Motorcraft parts. He's like, hey, you know, I got another water pump, you know, you know, if I bring it to the shop, can you put a water pump on, and, you know, I'll pay for coolant and everything. I'm like, yeah, you know, sure, you know, bring your parts, you know, we'll put it on, da 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 da. And, you know, it's like, why is this guy failing water pumps over and over? And I don't know if it was just like you were explaining back in your day, you know, you just get concentrated coolant. If this gentleman wasn't using distilled water with his concentrated coolant chemical composition he was mixing and dumping in his truck. Like, could that have an adverse effect on, I mean, that's not going to eat a bearing away or anything, but like, could it
That water
wind up,
pump seal is pretty delicate, you know, and
could,
so that's
could it be acidic and almost eat away or erode that, that
well,
sealing surface maybe?
it, it's possible, but one of the things that I've seen many times, I had friends in the Army who were even mechanics in the Army. This one guy one time, and I asked him, he had experienced multiple heater core failures in his Chevy pickup. And he and I had trucks that were almost exactly the same year. We both had a lot of miles on them. And he'd gone through like 3 or 4 heater cores. And we lived in the same part of the country. So I'm like, look, our trucks are basically the same, and we both drive them about the same. And I've never experienced a
What are you
radiator.
doing?
He was never changing the coolant. And so even when he would replace the heater core, all he would do was add back just enough coolant to replace what he lost. And I have no idea what he was adding. Was he going to the store buying the cheap conventional stuff when he should have been using in a GM vehicle? He should have been using deck school, unless he had done a complete flush out on it. And so I think there's just this big myth or, mystery about coolants.
I agree.
And so, and unfortunately, for people who are new to the diesel world, or maybe they've been in the diesel world for a while, but they've never been responsible for maintenance of them. Worldwide, all diesel engines lumped into a group. So we're talking industrial engines, commercial engines, automotive engines, all diesel engines. Half of them die prematurely because of a cooling system problem, either because it was neglected or it was somebody did something to it and they didn't use the right product. So basically half of all your diesel engines die because of a cooling system problem. And that's all avoidable.
Heat, got to keep that circulating through.
So, and that's the other thing, especially new customers, new diesel owners with especially 6.7 trucks or modified older trucks. I'm like, look, that vehicle that you're driving that's making basically 500 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, I said, it's burning a hell of a lot of fuel to make that kind of power. You have to. And all of that fuel getting burned generates an incredible amount of heat. Just open the hood on that truck someday, especially after you've been towing hard with it or something, and see how much heat is coming through there, and that's why, like on these 6.7s, they have a primary and a secondary cooling system. Also take a look and see how many additional coolers are being cooled, or components are being cooled by that coolant. We got a fuel cooler, we got a charge air cooler, we got a transmission cooler, we got the engine. What else? I'm missing something. I mean, there's transmission. I mean, basically everything is getting cooled, and it's all getting cooled by coolant. There's the only thing that's getting cooled by air anymore is the radiator itself.
Pretty much.
On the older trucks, you had a air-to-air intercooler, but now on the 6.7, you've got a water-to-air intercooler. And so we've even the EGR cooler as well. I forgot the EGR cooler. So you got all these heat-producing devices that are moving heat into the cooler. And so that coolant has got to be maintained in a very high level for it to survive. And most people don't.
And I think for the guys too, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think for the guys too that have, oh, I got that, I know I got that radiator seep. I just keep adding coolant to it. Well, it is so crucial for us, for our trucks to maintain proper cooling system pressure and to avoid these thermal spikes of of the vehicle, for the most part, overheating while it's sitting still, but it's not overheating. It's just, it's got this wide range of temperature that it's not accustomed to be working in. And then it's going to affect your regen, because there's a certain temperature range the engine has to be in in
Right.
order to conduct regen. And it's going to be a snowball effect, and it all comes back down to cooling system maintenance. And I was seeing that so much with 6.4s, and the 6.4s and the thermostat sticking open, and then I can't get into regen, and then my regen, my DPF's plugging up, and then these guys are flipping out because they got to replace this $1,800 filter, and why da da da. And it's all stemmed from, the cooling system and the truck not being able to maintain that cooling system pressure. And it knows that because the PCM is programmed to look at all these
Oh,
different
it's monitoring
inputs.
all that stuff,
Right.
and little simple things too. I remember years ago and I think this was during the 6-liter era. Uh, Ford had a whole bunch of bad radiator caps, you know, and they wouldn't go bad immediately, and they wouldn't just start puking out coolant overnight, but and it was worse. They would very slowly leak pressure. And as they got a little bit older and a little bit older, they would leak a little bit more. But then it would also, as you're driving it, it would start leaking coolant out, a very small amount. And so it was so slow that most people didn't even notice it until they were probably a gallon low. Um, and then with being a gallon low, now like you talked, we've got erratic cooling system performance. And so then we get into all kinds of weird things. We get cavitation because now I'm getting air bubbles exploding in the front cover, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so uh, EGR coolers not performing like they're supposed to because they're low on the fluid level. And so, yeah, cooling system maintenance I mean, I'm an oil guy. I like to sell oil, but I spend more time talking about coolant and cooling systems than I do oil.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
It's definitely forgotten about,
Yeah.
because it's, 6 gallons of fluid that is put into the truck that you kind of don't look at.
Well, and
Maybe hit the bottle and
you mentioned a minute ago about as a technician, the fact that you liked orange. Uh, but I'll tell you, from a owner perspective, or a guy who works with owners all the time, I was not a big fan of it because it required a lot of testing and supplementation with the revitalizer. And anytime you increase the complexity of a system, so in this case, a cooling system, people are going to ignore it because they don't understand it. And so, and the other problem I had all the time is I would tell people who had a relatively new vehicle, so starting in 11 and newer, I'd say, hey, go back to the dealer and get the test strips, get the Rotunda test strips, and get the revitalizer and follow the instructions that are in your owner's manual. And probably 75% of the time, these people, if they called me back, they would call me back and say, my dealer doesn't have the test strips or the revitalizer. And the parts guy looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language,
what did you
and
say?
we don't have that. What are you talking about? We don't have those things. And wouldn't even go through the effort of looking them up and ordering them. It's like, well, then, so if the parts guy doesn't know about it, then the service guys are not using them, and so that was a big problem with 6.7s, is that even when the owners would go back to try to figure out, hey, I've got an idea now of how I'm supposed to do this, they couldn't get the parts and the chemicals that they needed to maintain it. So that was a major frustration. And so we ended up changing a lot of coolant unnecessarily to a different product just so that they could maintain their system. So,
I remember back in the 2000s when I was growing up in the diesel game, and it was, six sevens, the 7.3s, and
oh yeah,
doing the cooling systems on those, and make sure you get the cooling system additive, and
right.
it was
That's
always
the other.
that blue color, and I always liked the color that stuff, and it was, it was just something I never forgot. And every time you did a, coolant flush, or did a, big repair or something that, required you to drain majority of the coolant, it was, let me get that, that little thin tall bottle with the little tiny lid, break that foil seal, and glub 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 into the degas bottle. But um I think I've done, when I go back to 6.7, and when you were talking the revitalizer, with the test strips, I think I've done a good amount of testing, and I've added the revitalizer quite a few times. But I think I've done more just drain and fills,
Right.
or, excuse me, pulling out the block heater element and the oil cooler inlet hose off the oil cooler,
Hmm.
draining both block sides of the block, doing the same with the radiator, and being pretty successful in getting
Oh
the
yeah.
majority of it out. I mean, I'm not
If you
getting
do all
all of
three
it
of
out.
those, you're gonna get basically probably over 90%.
Yeah, because it's real easy. If I don't know, if other guys techs out there, feel free to chime in, because all the little things that we learn, we like to, try to get out to you guys. But if you're doing a flushing a heater core, what I found that worked really, really, really well. And kudos to my coworker, Uncle Bobby B. He just got this kit from Matco, and it looked like a water cannon. It had a pullback handle. You
Hmm.
screwed on the water hose. You coupled on your air line, and it had, um, it looked like this, and it had steps on it that you could, put this size hose on it. But if you had a bigger hose, you could go farther up.
Right.
And depending on what hose or contraption you had, you could
5/8,
hook,
3/4, or 1 inch or
right,
whatever. Yeah.
you could hook it right up to the heater core. So what I did, I had to do a short block in a vehicle that had oil in the coolant. Guy didn't want me to pull his dash. He said, just flush out the heater core as best you can. So I took out the fender liner, took off both hoses off the heater core, got new bulk hose clamped it, got a big Rubbermaid container and set like right on top of the spring pocket frame valve cover area, and lowered down the cab just enough to where I could get the hose just dunk in the bucket. And then I got his contraption and slowly cracked it open and gave it air, and I was super impressed with how this, I think, what did he say, it cost $60, and it had some other attachments that you could, rig up to whatever you're doing. But it was slicker than shit, man. I was really pleased. Took it off this one, put it on the other hose, went back the other way, flush it out
I
that
was
way,
gonna
went
say,
back this way,
really,
flush it out this way.
back
And
flushing is always the best.
yeah, and it was really, really good. And it came out nasty, and then it kept getting clearer and clearer and clearer. But the one thing I have used in the past that I didn't get to use a whole lot of was the VC9. Have you heard of the VC9? The
Mhm.
iron and cooling system cleaner. It works
Right.
really, really well. If any of you guys want to do, a cooling system, flush on your truck and don't have a machine, if you guys drain it, that might be a video that we could make, or I could make. Anybody in my area looking for a cooling system flush, if you want to get down on a potential video, let me know, because this would be a good procedure for ones to know, using VC9. And say you got some rusty, scale buildup or something in the cooling system, or that radiator was nasty, did you have some oil in the coolant and caught it just in time and it wasn't yogurt? VC9 works real well. And I've also found Simple Green
Hmm.
to actually
I would actually recommend Simple Green.
work really well. Simple Green Dawn dish soap combo is what I really like to use when I have my fuel system contaminations, and clean out the tank, clean out uh, pretty much just a tank, or the def tank, depending on where's the contamination goes. But getting back to the VC9, the revitalizer, I think, well, I know the VC9's iron system cleaner, but I think I've used the VC9 product in the 6.7s more than the revitalizer. I think the revitalizer is kind of something that's like,
Well, and it's going away now because you don't use it with the yellow.
right. And where's that thing he just had pulled up here? Cody just sent this to me. So there is an SSM that we had just got out at the dealer a little while ago, and it talks about all the newer vehicles from 2018. It kind of goes back with what Tom was talking about, just based on the coolant timeline he was talking about, and
Yeah,
it says,
here goes clear back. Yeah,
yeah, it says the 2018 Expedition Navigator, 2018 to 2019 F Super Duty, and the 2019 E Series F650, 750 vehicles built on or after July 9th of 2018 and 2019 F-150 transit vehicles built on or after January 2nd of 2019 are now filled with the new Motorcraft yellow antifreeze coolant. When servicing these cooling systems on these vehicles, make sure to use the Motorcraft yellow antifreeze VC13G. Do not mix the different colors or types of coolant. Note, and this is something that I get called out on, or somebody's gonna poke out and, oh well, you're a lion, da 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 da. Note, the Motorcraft yellow antifreeze coolant may appear green in color due to the fluorescent dye used. Trust me, folks.
My son has a brand new 21
Trust
Mustang.
me.
It's funny you mentioned that. My son has a Mustang GT, performance pack, great car.
I can't hear that. I can't hear that well.
Oh, I said my son has a brand new 21 Mustang GT. He was at my house today helping me move some stuff. So, I mean, he's got like 800 miles on the car. So we pulled the hood. That's what we always do, you know. And so we're checking everything over, and I'm looking at the coolant recovery tank, and I'm like, I know the thing has yellow coolant in it, but I'll be damned if that doesn't look green. And so I'm glad to hear you say that, because they must be putting dye in it, or something about the plastic of the tank that was making it appear real light green. But I'm like, I know this car has yellow coolant in it.
It's funny, when you pour it from the jug into the degas bottle, it almost looks like you're pouring liquid refrigerant dye. Like you're just bloop, 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 bloop. Like it looks iridescent as it's going in. So yeah, it's weird. When we first started using it and we filled it up, we're like, dude, I don't know, man. This says yellow on the bottle, but that's not yellow in there, dude. It's like,
so no, that's cool.
I don't know.
I picked up another there was another TSB type product that I got. Oh, it was on the dated April of 2020, talking about backwards compatibility of yellow.
That's what we were trying to find.
Yeah, and so what it basically says is that you can, anything that was originally filled with orange can now be serviced or completely replaced with yellow.
Or topped off with.
Right. So topped off, service,
okay.
or
service, right. Okay.
So if the car came with orange, or vehicle came with orange, and you need to top off or service or completely replace, you can do that with yellow. So you can end up with a yellow orange mixture. But for any vehicle that came from the factory with yellow, so your newer vehicles
not do that.
Orange. Don't add orange. Don't add revitalizer. And the other thing I found was there was a testing document telling you which test strips to use.
No
And which,
kidding.
yep, and which flushing products to use.
No per coolant usage or per
Yes,
vehicle?
for coolant usage.
Really interesting.
Here, so where it shows yellow, orange, that was the Mazda green, and then here's gold, and then here is old conventional green.
Yep.
So what I'm going to talk about next is here on the yellow, but I got to turn it back so I can see it. So you can use the AccuStrip 3-way heavy-duty antifreeze coolant test kit, the little test strips.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that on yellow, but the only thing you're doing is testing for nitrate concentration.
That's it.
That's it. It's not going to tell you anything else about the pH level or your freeze boil protection. And then there's a corrosion kit for your extended life coolants. And you can use that, let's see, but only for 11 through 19 Super Duty F Series. Yeah, so only for diesel. And then you can use VC1. You do not use the VC8 revitalizer, and you can use VC9, which is the iron block cleaner, when the shop manual calls for it, basically when the system is dirty and needs it. And then, no, I'm sorry, VC8 was your old SCA, the old supplemental coolant additive. VC9 is the iron cleaner, and VC12 is the revitalizer. But you only use the revitalizer with yellow if it was on a diesel and you have created a mixture. So if you have an 11 through 18 truck, diesel truck that came from the factory with orange, and you have done a drain and fill, and you fill it back up with yellow, and so now you theoretically have like a 50 mixture of old orange and new yellow, then you could still use revitalizer to revitalize that mixture, because that mixture still has the orange in it. So, but I would probably do a complete flush and get it all out of there and just go straight to yellow.
I want to ask you a question. If an individual was to do a test and got a low nitrate level, would that be a cause for alarm? And they're checking this in their 6.7. So I guess we need to break down what somebody's question is going to be. And it's like, well, I bought these test strips and I checked my nitrate level. And according to the strip, it's low. Do I change my coolant or not? Well, what does nitrate level mean? Nitrate additive in the cooling system is going to is a corrosion inhibitor, correct? And
yeah, nitrate is a. I'm just going back here because I don't deal with nitrates very much because I use fully organic coolants and everything. But so just going to pull back up the definition of why are nitrates in coolant. So nitrate is a vital component in older conventional fully formulated antifreeze and is used to prevent liner pitting. So see, that's one of the things that people get confused about a lot, is that they think they need to run a heavy duty coolant in these, any of these, whether it's a 6.9, 7.3, 6.0, 6.4, 6.7. None of those by definition are a heavy duty engine. They are all a light duty engine being used in a super duty truck. And one of the definitions for that is the fact that they do not have removable cylinder liner. They are a piston in bore design, and so they don't have a wet sleeve. Now, if you jump over to a commercial diesel engine, whether that's a Cummins or a Caterpillar or whatever, and when you pull the cylinder head off of one of those, and then you're going to do a rebuild on it, and one of the first things that happens is that you pull the sleeve out of that block. So when they talk about cavitation, in most sense, they're talking about there's an additive that gets in we're talking about nitrates that so they're using different additives in the coolant to prevent cavitation from eroding the wet side of that liner, because those little air bubbles will get up against the wet side of the liner, the side that the coolant is cooling, and they will explode. And when they explode, they're like little grenades going off.
Yep.
And they take pieces of the cylinder liner with them. And so then the liner will eventually pit out, and you'll get coolant leaking into the cylinder because of cavitation.
Or in our case, I mean, I don't know if Cody has seen many, but I have seen quite a few 6.4 cavitated front covers right behind.
Because they would lose coolant,
Yep.
and the coolant level would get low because of the coolant loss. And so then you have the water pump impeller. Sometimes you'll pit out the water pump because the water pump impeller, when it comes to the top, there's not enough fluid in there to completely fill it. And so there's an air cavity in the top of the water pump impeller area. And so it's grabbing air bubbles, or it's grabbing air when it's turning, and it's pulling that air back down into the cooling system and forcing those air bubbles through the system.
Damn, that would be cool to have like a Gale Banks rear diff cover that was clear, and have like a clear front cover and like clear water pump, and you could see like that whole action. Like that'd be sweet to see, because I mean I'm picturing totally what he's just explaining in my head, and that's exactly what's happening. And to try to make that point or to explain that to the customer, that this is happening and all this coolant has now over time been getting into your crankcase and has now wiped out a bunch of lubricating components.
All your bearings are gone.
Now cylinders 2 and 8 are gone, and you got a rod hanging out the side of your block, and the rest of the parts in there waving at you. So
because your $5 radiator cap was bad.
Man, do you guys get the point how important coolant is? It is. I can't stress enough that it's definitely something forgotten, and it's just drain and fill, or how Matt says. Matt says spill and fill.
Spill and fill.
Which is basically what we do. I really, even with trans, and dudes are calling me out on trans services because I'm not using the trans machine and I'm not flushing the torque converter and this is, I do not like using the machines. Okay. I don't care. I do not like using the machines. I haven't had a bad experience. I just don't like using them. Draining them and filling them is going to be just fine. And if you stay on top of it, there's going to be no need for you to flush it all out. You're going to be replacing the majority of all the fluid, and do it twice. You'll be fine. It's, something that's silly you can do if you're at home doing your own oil changes. You know damn well you don't need a hoist to lift this thing up. You slide on your back, do your oil change, you do your fill filters. You guys all know you got extra parts in your truck and you're doing them on the side of the road. Take the 20 minutes, take the half hour. Listen to my podcast, listen to our podcast on Sunday, pick a nice clean area, and just drain your coolant. Have the front going, drain the front. I'll put a link in the description to the 2 videos, the 3 videos, because I cover 11 through 16, and then I cover 17 through current model year because the secondary drains just a wee bit harder. And just drop both your coolants. While those front boys are going, come back to the back and take off that hose that we were just talking about off the oil cooler. And then if you feel tickled, I'll link the other video in the description. You can bust out the block heater element and let that drain out. And you really have gotten all of the coolant. I don't remember. Isn't it like 7.5 gallons, like total capacity for 6.7?
Most 6.7s, I always measure it in quarts because that's how it is in our lookup guide. It's about 42 quarts total, primary and secondary. And that's about 30 and 12, I think it is, 30 primary and 12 secondary. But there's a few minor differences throughout the model years.
That's a lot of coolant, guys.
Oh, it's a shitload of coolant.
I know when I was at the dealer, I'd charge out 8 gallons.
That's a lot of coolant, especially if you're doing an engine, like you're putting in a long block or you're doing a short block. I mean, you can keep filling and filling. And I want to know, I want to know right here. I want to know how many DIYers is not really a question for you because you guys don't have these tools. How many techs out there are using the airlift systems to fill these diesels? I am not one of them. I do not use the airlift fill to fill these. I do not use the rad kits to fill them. Only the EcoBoosts, the diesel F-150, the transit diesels, and any 4 cylinders that I work on. I have had no issues whatsoever in my years of experience working on any of Ford's diesels Super Duties and have had them overheat. I always, if I ever do any repair, if it's an engine, if it's a water pump, if it's an EGR cooler, if I drain the cooling system, I fill the bottle all the way to the top. I will take that vehicle and I will go and I will drive it. When I come back, that coolant level is now all the way down into the cool zone. The cool zone after I got done driving it. You're like, gonna be what? Go back the next morning, check my coolant cap, check my cooling system, and that cooling system has now stabilized and is right now right where it should be in the cold level range. And I've had no issues. I want to know out there, let us know in the description or in the comment section, how many dudes out there are using the airlift. And if you guys aren't using the pre-diluted, are you using distilled water or are you using the garden hose? Come on. I know it's a pain to get distilled. What are you guys using? I want to know.
I use the airlift.
Would you say,
I
Tom?
wonder, is the airlift faster?
Yes. I can have a coolant filled in about 5 minutes.
Because it's pulling all the air out of the system using vacuum, right?
Yep.
Yep. So that probably would be the one advantage, Aaron, of the airlift system, is that you could probably get the system stabilized quicker.
Now, I have had somebody tell me, and I did try it. So I had to do a block heater element, and somebody suggested that I use the airlift on it, pull a vacuum on it, and then pull the element out, and it'll kind of,
right. You know, the whole,
you know what I mean?
Avalanche of
and it really worked. I couldn't remember who commented it.
Didn't you?
I did, but I don't think that one I used the airlift.
Cornwell sells a tool that's specifically for removing parts. It pulls.
Really? It just keeps a continuous vacuum on it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I guess it pulls a larger vacuum, I guess.
Really? It just affixes to the degas bottle cap, or that?
Just like the airlift. Just like the airlift does.
Oh, wow.
I've got the Cornwell kit where it uses different caps for the different systems.
Mine's the snap-on. It's got the little rubber donuts that you stick in the hole and you screw the little collar down that makes the thing inside bigger and just kind of.
That's what I use on power steering.
Okay. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. I have not had as many 6.7 radiators as I did in the very beginning fail. When I think back to like when the 11s came out, 12s, 13s, and we were doing radiators, I mean, just it seemed like every truck that came in would be like, I'm not even gonna pull it in. Go out and look, get driver's side just pissing. When I think now Illuma duties, maybe a handful, not nearly as many radiator or expansion tanks on the side as the ones previous,
Cab
but
mounts changed.
the what changed? Oh, the mounts changed?
Cab mounts changed
Oh, did they?
between the Illuma
Not,
duties and the metal ones.
Did
not
they?
as much flex, maybe.
I noticed when I down here, cab mounts go out yearly almost.
What?
Yeah, Florida, might as well just put some hockey pucks in there or something because cab mounts don't last. But every radiator I did on a 6.7, the cab mounts were toast.
Wow.
And it was
then
always the driver's side.
Cab starts flexing around and it's twisting the radiator. And
Well,
tank.
I'll give props to my man Bill down in Buford, Georgia. He did a really great video, and I've referenced it when talking to customers. He had a really great explanation when he was talking about the Mishimoto radiators in a 6.4 one. I think it was the particular video that I was watching. And he had brought up a good point that where these radiators are actually mounted on the core support and where it goes down right by the headlights, when you go up these driveways, these big curbs, and I mean, it's a truck. Sometimes people don't, creep up, boom, boom. When you get that front flexing and that radiator is mounted, oh, it's doing exactly that. And what do you think? Then tiny little seam gaskets between that aluminum and that plastic end tank are doing. It's just going to start.
Well, and then you got
crusty
pressure inside of it trying to force its way out. So as soon as you put it on, and you've got pressure from the inside, sooner or later, something's going to give. So.
Yeah, it's
Aaron, you made a good point though about distilled water. Let's go back for a second. And a lot of people don't understand why. Why do I need to use distilled water when I'm buying a concentrated coolant?
Because it's healthy?
Well, if you don't use distilled water, your system is still going to cool, and it's going to cool basically the same. What will happen though is that your coolant life will be cut short by a significant amount, because the first thing your new coolant has to do when you use tap water is it has to go in there and soften that hard tap water. Whereas if you use distilled water, it's basically already soft. And so then your coolant has a much longer life for that piece of the active package. Didn't ask it to go to work immediately, softening the water that you brought in there. And so that's why it's important. If you want to get basically the advertised life out of that coolant, water. And when you buy pre-diluted 50/50 coolant, it's already mixed with distilled water. So for that very reason.
We can talk about it now because when this airs, this video will already be out. I have a very important upcoming video. Big kudos to Mario Brothers for providing the needed materials to make this video possible. The biggest reason why, guys, do not use stop leak in your cooling system. I have been presented a transmission cooler off of a 2015 F350 with about 120 thou, and he bought this used and is loving it. And notice when he was towing, he was getting about 230, getting 240 on his trans temp. And he's like, oh man, I don't think this is good. And immediately after, he went back home and started having some 3-4 shift problems. I forgot what the next chain of events was, but he wound up adding an auxiliary cooler that was not Ford and kind of bypassing this one because he doesn't know what's going on. And the temperature started coming down. Make a long story short, took the filter off, blew through it, and nothing was blowing out the other end. So we brainstormed. He got one, made a hell of a difference. 190 degrees till I think it was like 210 when he was towing. But I was able to cut it open in half with a chop saw and was able to actually see when you held it sideways, all of the perforated holes in there. I was just wiping the rubber, the material of the stop leak right out of the grooves of where it was stuck in the transcooler. Unfortunately, the problem was too far gone, and he ultimately wound up having to replace the transmission. And what we think happened is he wound up overheating it, and there's no way that the trans should be rolling at 245, 250 degrees, especially towing. So if you're doing that to the transmission, there's other cooling system components in that circuit. You have your charge air cooler. He's now getting a code for charge air cooler efficiency. He's going to have to go upstream and he's going to have to replace his charge air cooler. What's the other thing in that circuit? He has
radiator.
That and the fuel cooler. And I mean, when you talk about cooling system contamination, I think oil in the coolant is by far the worst. But don't be a silly dum-dum and induce a problem into your truck by using stop leak.
Well, my question is, why are you putting stop leak in the secondary system on a 6.7 anyway?
It was he bought it at an auction. It was the
I know, but
previous owner.
I mean, that system doesn't even touch the engine, you know?
Yeah, being
But that same problem that you just
silly.
described, though, is killed a lot of oil coolers in 6.0s.
Big time.
People would because that very same concept of those little tiny holes in the oil cooler will fill up with either stop leak or casting sand or deteriorated coolant. You know, all the above.
Same thing that happens in AC. I won't touch AC if it's had stop leak in it. It's all or nothing.
I've never heard of that. ACs has stop leak too?
AC stop
Yeah.
leak.
You gotta be careful.
You gotta be careful of that stuff. And condenser in them.
So hold on. Now how you're gonna have to put that through the ports, right?
Yep. Comes in with a small Freon charge.
Get out of here. I never knew there was such a thing.
A lot of that AC Pro crap, the big cans that
they
advertise, a lot of it has stop leak in it.
Yep.
Already.
Seal conditioner, stop leak, and Freon and oil.
All in one can. Sounds too good to be true.
Fixes everything.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
I had a set of gauges ruined because of that.
Really?
And the dealership wouldn't pay for it.
And then throw some dye in there too, you know.
Well, gents, this was definitely some good talk about coolant. I want everybody to really stay engaged with this particular episode. In the comment section, whether it be for Tom, Cody, or myself, regarding some questions about cooling system. I really want to know what your plans are for your cooling system. Did you guys not know about distilled water in the concentrated mix? Did you not know that Ford has pre-diluted? Do you not use Motorcraft? Do you stick with something that you guys are familiar with? I know there are a couple of different orange ones. What's the one with the Z? Zurich?
I use that in my truck, the red Cummins
Yeah,
Zerk pre-charged.
That, yeah. Kind of looks like that stuff right there. Right, yeah, like right there in that bottle. He's drinking it right now, folks. Um,
A lot of people have used Cat ELC over the years.
Yep.
Extended life coolant.
Yep. I've heard of that too. I've heard of
what I
it.
try to get everybody to go to now too is just jump over, because all of these other coolants are some type of a hybrid. And they're a hybrid of a combination of inorganic and organic salt technology. And the simplest thing to do is jump over all of that and just go to a fully organic coolant. And I don't know why Ford hasn't done that. I'm sure it's money, because it probably costs a little bit more, and they're buying millions of gallons of coolant every year. So, but for the individual owner, just jump to a fully organic coolant, and you eliminate a lot of this problems. So,
Healthy coolant, healthy oil,
yep.
and oh my gosh, healthy fuel system. I don't even care about the coolant. I don't even care about the oil. I want healthy fuel, for God's sakes. Change your fuel filters. New to your pets. Make sure to like, comment, sub, share. And if you guys got any questions, make sure to reach out to us. We had fun. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll catch you next time.